Today, we got a great interview with Scott Deetz, and we're going to be discussing the new path to a premium exit. This is actually a presentation I saw Scott give a couple months ago, and I thought, man, we got to get this on the show. It is that good. So without further ado, Scott, welcome to the show.
Hey, everybody. How's it going? Hey, Travis. Good to talk with you again for sure.
All right. Well, Scott actually has a prepared presentation for you. And throughout this presentation, if you guys have questions, don't be afraid to put them down in the comments down below, and we'd be happy to get to them. And I'll ask Scott here live in person. And then whenever something sparks for me, I'm also going to be asking those as well. So don't be afraid. Don't be shy. Put some comments down below. Hit the like button if you like this video as well. So Scott, go for it.
All right, that sounds great. Hello, everybody. And just before I get started, 30 seconds on myself. I came into the Amazon industry as a seller 2013. I did my first exit in 2003, which is basically close to 20 years ago. I've been doing strategic advisement ever since, and started up the Northbound group advisor group in 2016 when I saw there was a need for sellers to translate their business success into exit success. And I've been doing it ever since. And really, my passion is to help sellers get their fair due. And so anything that furthers that mission is what we're about, myself and at Northbound. So with that backdrop, let me pull up the screen here. And I titled this A New Path to a Premium Exit because as probably most of you have heard, the world is changing rapidly, in Amazon. It's also changing rapidly outside Amazon. And both of those have impact on how you run your business and how you think about the exit process. And so what we're going to talk about today is that there still is a path to a premium exit for a business. We're going to talk about what does it need to look like today compared to what it might have looked like even 12 or 24 months ago. So a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, it's a complex topic. Exiting your whole business is something I've been doing for 20 years, and I still don't feel like I have it down. And it's a complex topic in a short amount of time. So the slides that you have are our process that we've built over the years, and I'm happy to give of that. I'll work with Travis to make it available for you. It gives you a simplified version, but I want to give you something that you can kind of think through and study on your own in case some of this is maybe doesn't resonate or is a little bit complicated the first time through. Don't let that throw you. The second thing is that I've got a toolkit that we have and some case studies, and you're happy to get a copy of that. But I recognize also that exiting a business is often private and sometimes kind of intense. So whether you're in a deal now and you have a question, maybe you're thinking on this year or a couple of years from now, just drop me an email at this scott@northboundgroup.com and either put toolkit in there if you want the toolkit or put your question in. And we've got a team of over 30 folks and we're happy to answer it. And this is just something as part of my passion in the industry and wanting to work with Travis, who's been through the process. He can tell you it is sometimes has some nervous days into it or some confusing days, and we want to be able to help you through that.
To say it's an intense process is it's an understatement. It's probably the most intense thing that you'll ever go through in your entire life, almost.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great point because from a negotiating standpoint, we'll talk about that later. If you don't keep what's called pressure on the balloon to move a deal forward, the air goes out of the balloon and the deal doesn't happen because it is such a big event, and either you or the buyer, can lose patience with it and have it walk away. So if nothing else you take from this, you've got another resource that you can ask your questions or offer comments or present a situation and see how others might think about it. My goal here is to provide within the hour here the knowledge, the process, and the tools. So I'm giving you all of those, not only to increase the valuation, but to also increase that you get the right deal over the finish line. And a lot of people talk about the multiple and the valuation, and they might lose sight that there's actually a percentage chance that you might not close any deal at all. And whatever multiple that you get, if you don't get the deal done, it doesn't do you any good. So the tools here are going to help you do both, increase likelihood and increase valuation. And here's where I always start my presentations. which is the fact that over half of the money that you ever put in your pocket is going to come when you exit your business, not the entire time that you're running it for most sellers. Now, there's no global percentage, but this is one of the toolkits that we provide people that work with us. And I have never had a Northbound client that we've helped exit that has had less than half of their lifetime things that they ever got out of the business and into themselves not happen at the exit or on the payments that come after the exit. And the reasons is that you're constantly refunding your own growth. Typically, you're taking money, cash, you're turning it into increased inventory purchases. And sometimes you might feel like I receive money from Amazon, I send it overseas, it repeats the cycle. And where am I in the middle? And the answer is when you exit, that's when you tend to get yours in the middle. The second reason is ordinary income versus capital gains. Typically at a federal level and a state level, you might be paying 40% in ordinary income, but when you exit your business and qualify for long-term capital gains, it might be half of that or 60% of that. So the same dollars pre-tax are not the same dollars after tax. And that's a huge way to think about how you need to analyze how you run the business. And then finally, most of the time when you're doing an exit of any size, you don't get all of your money up front, you get your money over time. And when you build in all of that and you do it correctly, you're structuring in something that done wrong, which I'm sure many of you that are listening to this have an Amazon seller friend or somebody that you met that did an earnout deal that didn't happen and got very upset. But it also can be something that can be very lucrative, whether it's a stabilization payment or a earnout or what's called rolled equity in the business. And we put all of those factors together, more than half of the money that you get out of your business doesn't come historically what you've taken out, and it doesn't even come between now and an exit, unless maybe you're running your business for 7 or 10 years. It comes when you exit. And so when I give a live presentation of this, I'll now ask for a show of hands. And it simply says, if more than half of the money that you get is going to come when you exit, who here spends more than 2 hours per week or 5% of your time making that payday happen? And, go ahead, Travis.
Yeah, it's just crazy that this is what really got me thinking when you presented this is we don't plan for this. And now when I look back at my exit, the exit that we had and the number that we got after the exit was probably more than 50%. It was probably closer to 75% of what we got over the lifetime of the business. And so to take, 2 hours per week to plan for that, I think we could have got an even bigger number. I don't regret what we did, but now that I'm actually getting into the weeds more with you and interviewing you and seeing you speak, we could have done a lot more if we worked with someone like you when we did our exit.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and absolutely. My first exit was over 80%. And that was when when that close happened, it finally opened my eyes. I said, "Oh wow, the money's not in running the businesses for years or decades. The money's in building something valuable and exiting it, and then deciding what I want to go do." So, and you're exactly right. Most of the time, people run the businesses and then they either get tired or they realize the market's hot, and then they try and go to exit right away. And in the old days, that worked okay. But as we'll see here, that's not the process that you'll need to have going forward if you want to maximize it. So I've got the good news first. There's more buyers. We're in Northbound's world, we've got well over 70 or 80 aggregators that are out there in some fashion. You've got private equity. Those buyers are pouring a ton of money, north of $15 billion into the industry. So it's easier for you to get paid up front. Back when I started in 2016, you used to have to do a lot of what's called seller financing, which is basically be the bank on your own deal, and that's never a lot of fun. And for the great companies that are out there, there are multiples that you can get today that we couldn't have touched, no matter how well I could negotiate in 2017, 2018, even 2019. When the first aggregators started, the multiples range between 2 to 2.5 times annual earnings, and now they regularly can be, 2x that, more than double that. And you're starting to realize that although it got delayed, we are within the next phase of the market, that companies are going to start to be going public within the next 3 years. And this provides for a validation of the business model, which is a bunch of people aggregating things, buying maybe at for example, 5 times earnings, but trading at a 3, 4, or 5 times revenue, which is what's called multiple arbitrage. So all of those things are good things that can help you get a premium valuation. And as you can probably imagine, the next slide is what's the catch? Before I get to that, here's a couple of examples at the high end of the market, just so you get a sense of how far north done right things can go. These are real examples. One of the things that you'll find is that I'm not big on hype and disillusionment afterward. I'm big on being real right away. And so here you've got a client that had $3 million of earnings, upfront multiple 6.5. Some inventory payment on top of it, some deferred payments and some contingencies, nosed in close to a 10x multiple when you put everything together. And here's another one that was a little bit bigger and got to an 8 multiple. And what you might be saying is, well, Scott, that's great. They're doing, massive amounts of earnings. And certainly I use them to show what the potential is. But these multiples are not based on size. They're based on some fundamentals that we're going to show you that are growth rate and profitability and things that happen even at the lower end of the marketplace. But the key point to recognize is that there are ways that you can get paid, but you're not going to get all of that money up front. It's going to come in these different buckets. Okay. So that's the good news. The challenging news is this. We've got a lot of industry headwinds, even before the recent challenges around the world. You had rising shipping costs, you had lead times increasing. That drives the need for more what's called working capital. You've got price increases, inflationary pressures. So you do have a lot of headwinds, and very rarely are we finding businesses that are making a higher percentage profit today than what they were a year ago. You've also got Amazon tightening the rules, which for some of you out there might be a finally, thank you. I'd rather have a fair playing field. But for other people, that it does make it harder to take new products and get them, for example, ranked at the top. And there might be increased competition in the marketplace. You've got the whole macroeconomic risks that are going on. And then finally, you've got a lot of buyer challenges that are out there right now, because while a huge amount of money has been raised, there's been some acquisitions that have been done that did not make sense and did not perform very well. And so now you've got a series of, think of it as what I call investment committees or boards inside of these buyers saying, hey, last year we bought a whole bunch of stuff. Some of it didn't go so well. Some of it will blame on the industry issues, rising cost of goods sold, for example, but some of it is we had some growing pains in operating brands. We don't really know how to lift these brands up after we buy them. Some of them might be we did diligence, what's called due diligence, on deals that weren't smart deals to do. And as they get smarter, it gets harder for you to get a deal done. So these are some of the headwinds. And the way to think about this is, don't let the headwinds say, oh, I can never exit. Okay. Everybody who is a business that's profitable has some level of exit that's possible. And the key point is not to think of it like a light switch, but to think of it like a thermometer. I want to rise up my valuation and I want to proactively deal with these challenges. But I know if I just run, right into them, I'm probably not going to get to where I want to go, because deals are going to be harder to close. And I'm going to have more sophisticated buyers. So I better be thinking about being more sophisticated on my side. And the implication then is, yeah, go ahead.
Discuss just a little bit of that last slide. And looking at all those headwinds or just all the bad news, this is the importance that we talk about all the time on this channel, is building a brand. Because when you build a brand and costs start to go up, you can increase your price and you will not lose sales as a result, because people are loyal to your brand. And all you got to do is explain it to them. You can tell them that, containers to get from China to the US went up this much. So that's why we had to raise our price. And most loyal customers will stay with you. So to combat this, build a brand, and that's going to actually make your company more valuable in the long run as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only in an easy market, maybe your brand didn't matter that much because people 3 years ago were buying just pure product companies, so they weren't valuing brand as much. Now brand is more valuable than ever and is more of a differentiator for you. So all of these problems are really opportunities. If you have a brand that has that loyalty, and you have not only a loyalty from price sensitivity, but when you come out with new products and ability to go back to that audience to get new products to the marketplace, you're now seen as even more valuable because of the difficulties in the marketplace, which can command even more of a premium. Yep, excellent point. So let's talk about the old and then the new strategy. The new path is that you have to strategize your exit first, you have to maximize your valuation second, and then you have to optimize the transaction itself through negotiations. And we'll go through each one of those three phases. So before I dive into the strategy, I want to contrast the old way, which was I list my business, on a site or send it out by email. It's all based on trailing 12 months. It was all about getting ad backs. I collect up a bunch of offers. I take the highest bid, and I walk away in 60 to 90 days. That's what it looked like in 2018. Now what it looks like is that you're going to have what I call a multi-lane highway where you can consider multiple types of transactions. And what you need to be thinking about is not just listing your business, but presenting your business, your brand, your team, and the opportunity in front of a buyer in a very compelling way. You need to be describing your business as a future-oriented valuation, and I'll explain to you how buyers think about that. But the short version of that is that whenever a buyer says to you that we only buy on historical earnings, I will say back to you that is absolutely false. And I will give you a one-sentence explanation as to why it is absolutely false. And that sentence is, how much of your historical earnings does a buyer get to pocket? And the answer is $0. That was already spent on last year's conference or trip around the world or whatever it is that you happen to do. The only thing that they're buying is the future potential of your business. The reason that they're using a trailing methodology is because it's something that they can anchor on to calculate it. And I want to separate valuation in a business versus calculation of a business. They may calculate it based on TTM, but if they've got two companies doing $1 million worth of profit and one of them is growing at 100% and the other one is flat, you can absolutely be guaranteed that they are not valuing those businesses the same. So you have to think much harder about what's the future trajectory and future valuation of my company. And then you're going to have to do what I call lanes, levers, and lifts. You're going to have to negotiate with these buyers in a more sophisticated manner than what you did previously. That being said, if you do this, it opens up opportunities that you never had before. And you should plan on sticking around longer, but you get to set the time frame based on the buyer and the structure that you want to implement. So Sun Tzu said, every battle is won before it is fought, and that certainly applies to exiting. Just like Travis said, we're now working with our clients up to 2, maybe even 3 years before they exit in some instances. While at the same time, we still have people that come to us and say, yeah, I'd like to exit in the next 90 days. But the more we can plan earlier, the better we can fight the battle that needs to be won. This was what it looked like in the old days. You take 3 to 4 weeks, you go to market, you take 3 to 4 more weeks, you get a bunch of LOIs, you pick the top one, you sign the agreement, you get to the finish line, you work a transition, and you're done. Okay. Now what you need to be thinking about is in the strategize, maximize, optimize, and realize methodology that we talk about is when you're thinking about strategize, you first have to establish your plan. You have to establish how you're thinking about your goals. You have to start even thinking about how am I going to onboard my company inside of another company. Then you have to get into the finance side of it, and you've got to assess where am I strong and where am I weak. You have to build a realistic forecast. You have to look at how can I increase my sales and my profitability. And then once you have this plan, you have to go, you know what? It might be ready to go to market now, but as I said, it might be that there's 3 or 4 things I can do. I could maybe go grab a couple $100,000 worth of loans, or I can go partner with somebody to my supplier to put cash into my business, and I might be able to triple the business before I even go to market. And so we talk a lot about maximizing your value before you go to the go-to-market line. But then on the other side of things, You better plan on being able to integrate your business, plan on the ability for the buyer to accelerate your business and really be able to design it the way that you want, and then plan on an ability to think about what we call second exits. And as Travis, you said, we've had that happen with just one of our other folks that did a second exit. The second exit paid more than the first, even though they got 80% at closing. The 80% that the 10% that they cashed out was worth the exact amount as the previous 80% because they structured the deal properly.
And then what I was talking about earlier with my business and how we could have got even more if we would have structured it correctly, that's the strategized part that you're going to be going into here in a little bit. That's the part that we didn't spend enough time in that. And I'll give you the most common mistake that probably entrepreneurs make and that we made is we were cash basis versus accrual. And that can make a huge difference on your valuation. And so that was one of the big things that, if I would have worked with someone like Scott, he would have been like, no, you need to change this now. And we could have probably looked like we had a higher EBITDA, which would have led to a bigger payout in the end. But again, I don't regret what we did. I'm still happy with what we did. And then we've done the whole integration. That's what we're doing right now. Actually, we're a year into it almost. And we're getting ready to hit the accelerate button. That's going to come in June. And we had that plan going into it, though, is we knew the exact way we were going to accelerate the business. And so the integration phase is almost done for us. It did not take 7 to 10 weeks. It took about a full year. And Accelerate's going to start probably in June for us. And that's when we're really going to hit the accelerated pedal and really be able to take off. So we're excited about that next phase because the integration stage is not fun. It's not sexy. It's boring. It's a lot of meetings, but it leads to something that should be potentially be greater. And then, of course, acceleration, we're excited for that last step, which is the one we're really looking forward to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and all of these, are illustrative of the new process versus the old. And one of the things that you hit on is this the ability to strategize this in advance with people that have kind of been there. Because as you can probably imagine, is if you underreport your profitability, a buyer doesn't see it as their responsibility to correct you upward, right? And so for people that are out there, part of why this is so important is to get a handle on that and know that information before you get to the table. So if we think about it then, and we talk about the strategy, now that we've got it, we say, okay, what's our goal? And this is one of the things that you can get in the toolkit. I always like to set the goal on what's your after-tax proceeds. You might be here today. You might be, if we maximize your valuation by better negotiation, you might get to here. But what I want to understand is what's your goal of what this business you think can obtain before it exit, but that might not be your no work goal. And one of the things I want to make sure, one of the things I realized, I ran my first company for close to 10 years before I exited it. And on the day that I exited it and I finally saw the light of the money that was in the exit, I realized I could have done the same thing in half the time. And then after I exited my first company, all kinds of other people approached me to invest in my company and my next idea because I'd been there and I'd done it. And so recognize that as an entrepreneur, you're eventually all working toward financial freedom. But unless we set goals of where we're at today, where we can be over time, and when we're going to exit, and that we might use multiple exits to get to our ultimate goal in life, you don't know what to do with this business. Or as I like to say, am I using this business to walk all the way into town if I'm out, 30 miles out in the country? Or am I using this business to get me to the bus station to take the bus into town? And there's very different ways that you can look at it, and you have to know that about your business, because if this business maybe was the first business you got in because you joined an Amazon course and you got into small and light, a lot of people never heard the third part of that is sometimes small and light is boring. And if you sell another little silverware tray inside of a dishwasher, you're not going to want to be on this planet because it's such a boring business. You may need to get out of this business and then get into something that Travis has said is more brandable, less price sensitive, those types of things. So you've got to make sure to set that goal and set it in terms of valuation. Many people we work with have revenue goals. My last 30 days I did this, I want to get to this. You need to have a valuation goal as well. And then what you need to do is you need to say, how am I going to time my jump? And the way that I like to think about it, and this is another reason why a lot of people start too late, is if this is your kind of your growth in your company and it starts to level out, and I'm not saying that it's going to go do this, but when I draw the graph this way is if I'm a buyer and you're going like this and then it starts to do this and it starts to level out, what is their fear? Their fear is that it's going to go like that. And so you have to start a little bit earlier. This is when you want to exit, when there's still what we call gas left in the tank, which means you need to start the process a lot earlier, and you need to start the planning process, as I like to say. If you're in business, the best time to design a business of how to get out of it is before you got into it. So you really should start the planning of that 2 hours every week today, or if today is one of your hours, start tomorrow. Okay, so we're on to part two, maximizing your valuation. So we have to know your numbers, and accrual accounting, as Travis said, step number one. If you don't know what accrual accounting is, don't worry, you're the CEO of your company, not the financial person, but you need to work with an accounting person in e-commerce and or Amazon accounting that knows it. Then you need to understand this thing called net working capital, which is how much inventory and cash do I need in order to grow my business. So if I need 3 months worth of inventory at Amazon and I'm buying $100,000 a month, that means I need about $300,000 of working capital. And the reason that that's so important is because if I triple the size of the business, I have to triple the size of the working capital need, and I need to know what that number is. I need to then build a forecast so that I understand what my growth is, because that will affect my net working capital. And then I need to do what's called best, middle, and worst case scenario, or what we call base case. So most people are just getting a handle before they sell on the accrual accounting part, and they haven't really analyzed this. And if I said one thing to you over the next year or 6 months or whenever it is that you're looking to exit, the better that you can do these, the better negotiating position you're going to be in, for two reasons. One is you're going to know what's too little of a valuation on your company, but two, you're not going to have wide-eyed visions of what is too much either, and you're going to increase that likelihood that you get a deal done.
And I
And
want
then
to
the way
add a little bit
yeah,
to
go ahead.
this. So I did none of this at all. So accrual accounting, we already talked about that. I was all cash basis when we sold, but you said that's step one, which is great. Net working capital, scenario modeling, and forecasting. I didn't even know what those were really. I mean, I know what they were, but now that I'm in that corporation, because I'm still running our business, even though it's 10 months later, that is like what I do is I forecast, I scenario model, and I figure out the net working capital. And I'm constantly making reports to give to my CEO, because I'm the president of my company, to discuss this. And it's such an important part of it. And we did profit first accounting when we ran our business, which is probably how we survived. And that was how we figured out net working capital. But working with all the clients that we have with our agency over the last couple of years, this is probably the biggest skill set that you can learn as an entrepreneur, because net working capital, I see people all the time try to launch 3 to 4 products at a time, and then all of a sudden they have no cash. And then all the products kind of flounder and they don't do much as a result of not having enough cash to push them or to keep them in stock. And so really knowing net working capital is huge, and forecasting. And even if you over forecast and have some inventory left over, you can always liquidate. But these are things that can really hurt your business. Like right now we're going through stock issues, mostly supply chain, but it was due to, forecasting. We didn't get our forecasting right. We actually ended up selling too much. And so that actually hurts us now because we're out of stock. And so just knowing all this stuff can be huge for pushing your business forward, but also for your valuation. So really learn this stuff as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said you provided what I would say is a very real world example of it, is that your buyer is having to do that, and you in this case now are doing that. And so knowing that skill before you exit, it's so critical. And to break it down for people, while I don't mean to say that it's not complex, I want to also reassure you, all of you that are out there learned how to do keyword research. That sure as heck wasn't easy. You've You've learned how to do PPC and bidding and all of those things, and that's not easy. This is another skill set that transitions you along there. And my final comment is, what is good for, we use a lot of what we call mantras in our company. What is good for selling a business is good for running a business. So as important as this is in exiting a business, this is absolutely critical for you to run the business as well. So this is not extra work. This is required work that you need to do in order to really feel confident that you understand and you're driving the car as opposed to getting dragged behind it. So but you did it. This is exactly what you're now doing. This is your world, and the sooner you know it, the better you can look at this trajectory of what's happening to your valuation, and more importantly, even what could I do different to make this trajectory if it's not happening today. And that might mean only releasing 2 products and never running out of stock, as opposed to trying to do too much. So, and you hit perfectly on this forecasting. Running a business without forecasting is like driving a car with your windshield cover on. It literally is, there is no other way to say it. You fundamentally can't understand the value of your company unless you have forecasting. And here's why. No forecasting, look at this list. It means no business planning, because I can't figure out where I'm going with my business. I have no ability to determine my potential future valuation. I have no ability to determine when is the best time to sell, this year, next year, or the following year. I have no ability to negotiate a premium valuation with a buyer because I can't show them what the potential is and get them to understand it. I have no ability to evaluate what is a good offer because I don't know whether or not I should hold or sell, or what I call should I stay or should I go. And I've got no knowledge about whether or not the exit's ever going to lead to a life-changing exit or not. So if you think about all the things that you don't have, if you don't have forecasting, you sit there and you go, okay, why don't I have it? And we'll talk a little bit about that. Is you probably don't have it because the answer comes back, well, it changes every day. I don't know how to do it. I don't have a tool to do it. And separate all of those things from how important it is to do it. Okay, finding a product to launch to market and building a brand is one of the absolute hardest things to do, but that doesn't mean don't do it. That just means that you need to do it in order to be successful, because it's one of the most important things. Think of forecasting like that. And so if you think about one of the precursors to exiting, and when I first started working, Travis, with clients in Amazon, I thought I was going to help people exit right away. And I started in 2016. We didn't do one exit until 2018. A full 2 years later. And it wasn't that we didn't have people that didn't want to exit. Every client that we ran into, we found that if we could forecast with them and we used our forecasting tool, we could show them that it was better for them to wait than to exit. And we have a value in our company that we never picked the timing of an exit of one of our clients. And every one of them was like, "Are you telling me that this is the math?" And I'm like, "Yeah, if you get a little working capital in here, you're going to double your profitability and you're going to be able to get a higher multiple." And they were like, "So if I wait one more year, I'm going to get paid $1 million." And you're like, "Yeah, you are." So, but that's how important this topic is. And so one of my question is who here has this, that they actually believe for 2021 and 2022? And it's usually the same number of hands that go up as the people that are spending 2 hours a week on exiting, which is the minority of you. And the point, if you take nothing else from this, discussion, is I want to point you in the right direction so that you start reallocating your time that is going to lead to that 50% or more payback. And this is one of the critical ones. So then if we go on to the next topic and we talk about the bottlenecks that you might have in the business, one of the most important things to think about when you're prioritizing your business and growing your business is that you want to make sure to understand, now that I built my forecast, why am I not doing as well as I could? And usually it's due to one of these 5 or 6 things. I know this might be a little small, but it's lack of capital, lack of team, lack of time. I'm too low in my profitability. And a Pareto diagram simply prioritizes the things that you have, and then you take actions. And once I get the capital in, then I can release more products. Then I realize I have a lack of time. And then I free up more time because I bring in more team. Then I have low profitability. I focus on higher profitability utility products. And as you can see, you just keep reiterating on what are the biggest bottlenecks. You solve that bottleneck and you move on to the next one. This is a very important operational. This goes all the way back to the 1950s. Total quality control and Deming and all these. These are time-trusted ways of you to increase your valuation, which is to be critical of yourself. But most people we see that are working on things, they're working on everything at once. And what happens is they're then nothing, when everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. And so I really want you to focus on it. And again, in the toolkit, if you're interested, we have this exact diagram that you can plug in these percentages and really get crystal clear about how are you going to unlock the bottlenecks in your company before you meet the buyer, so that because that's what the buyers do. Usually what they do is they love to find companies that have all of these problems, and they say, well, I don't want you to spend a year to unlock them. I'd like to buy you for a low multiple, and then I'll unlock them, and then I get the premium valuation. And our side is to say, no, let's unlock them to a certain degree first and then design our exit. So then if we go here, and this is just an example of that, there's three things. You unlock it and you get the benefit. You show the buyer how to unlock it, and then you maybe to structure it into an earnout, or you do the last thing, as my brother used to say, Scott, hope is not a strategy, is you hope that they can unlock it. And so even if you can't unlock a bottleneck, you want to find a buyer that can. I'm in, supplements, but I'm on Amazon only. I want to find somebody that can get me off Amazon and has already done it in supplements. I'm in the US. I want to work with somebody that can get me over to Europe or whatever those bottlenecks are. So I'll give you an example here, and these case studies, just because of time, I wanted to make sure that you had them, but I'm going to go through them relatively quickly, and people can watch them back if you need to. This was the power of increased supplier terms that we did. We had a company that was worth about $800,000 and couldn't find a buyer, making $245,000 a year. We came in and we renegotiated the supplier terms. And I said to the owner, I said, hey, Bill, you can exit now and leave a ton of money on the table, but you're in a massive growth. He said, I just don't have the cash flow and I don't want to risk the money. So we went to the supplier and we got 20% down, 30% 60 days after shipping, and we negotiated the final payment 210 days after order or 150 days after shipping. So we completely flipped the supplier terms. That allowed us to order 5 times as much stock. We increased the business profitability by roughly that amount, and we did an exit and we increased it $4 million valuation. I don't use that example that I can get you these terms. And I'm sure everybody would, if I promised you that I could, I'd have more emails in my inbox than I knew what to do with. The point is this net working capital thing that Travis is talking about is critical. And every bit that you get better at supplier terms drives your net working capital improvement, but it also then drives your valuation because you can invest and accelerate your growth and you can negotiate a higher premium.
That's actually one of the biggest things that we're working on with all our suppliers is better terms. And so it's not just with your suppliers, we're doing it with our shipping company, we're doing it with everybody, and we're trying to get it pushed out further. And the funny thing is, I'm the agency for our agency runs the company that bought us, all their brands, and they're trying to negotiate terms with me. And I'm just like, I work for you guys, come on.
I'm your team. Yeah. And the way, if I could put one sentence that you write down, where people do it wrong, they think of negotiating supplier terms as an event rather than a process. Every time that you're building your skill set as a company, you're building your skill set as a negotiator. We actually have a whole program that we do called partner supplier negotiations. And we have a defined strategy of how we do it, how you put the pitch together, how you put, you keep it simple for people that might not have English as a first language, what to ask for, what to prioritize, and then importantly, how to keep doing that as a process over time, which generally leads to a bigger result. And so think of yourselves as doing this always, but building a skill set to not do it, because the time that I did this, the person said to me, Bill said, I've already negotiated my supplier terms. And I said, yeah, I know exactly how that negotiation probably went when you asked for better terms. I said, you sent them an email rather than getting them on a video call. And you said, can I get better supplier terms? And they said no. And then you said, bummer. And he said, yeah, well, I'd like to think it went better than that. And I was like, well, what you need to think through is we explained instead was, we're going to order $1.2 million, or we're going to order, 4 to 5 times worth of product if we can get you to get us to be able to pay after the holidays. And so not everybody can do that, but you constantly think of it as a process. You get better and better. And this is a critical thing to driving your valuation. This is, central on the path to a premium exit. Another case study we did, a lot of people recognize they may be struggling right now. And this goes to the point that Travis mentioned earlier. We had a client, they're basically were almost broke. They were losing money each month, and the owner was thinking about shutting down the business. And what we had to do was a combination of supplier negotiations. We had to get out of what was profitable. We had to slash a bunch of the products so that we could invest the cash flow in the best products and keep them in stock. And we went from somebody that had put $200,000 in, and this is personal to me because there was an owner that was having to go back to their spouse and not feel very good. And we turned it around to making $500,000 a year. And lo and behold, we got a 4x plus multiple with inventory and then a huge contingent upside. And we got a working capital guarantee of them to put more money into the business. And so the point is that no matter, even if you're struggling right now, there's a path to analyzing this and putting you on that trajectory toward a premium exit. And I'm going to give you one more thing that I think is absolutely critical for everybody to understand before we go to the last section here, which is executing the transaction. It's what I call the 5-for-1 principle. And when I'm again in person, I'll take a dollar bill and say, who wants to turn a dollar bill into $5? And people raise their hands, and I'll say, here's how you do it. This business right now is making $500,000 a year. And most people think that if they can get it to $510,000 a year, they picked up 10 grand. But the answer is, in the year before you exit, you actually pick up the 10 grand and you pick up the multiple on the 10 grand. So $10,000 worth of cost savings or improvements is 10 grand today in your pocket, and at a 4 multiple, and I'm not guaranteeing you what multiple you can get, but it is a multiple, you increase your valuation $40,000. When we exited my first company, we found a way to save about $250,000. And we exited for around a 5.5 multiple. Let's say, that wasn't exactly it, but if I just throw that number out there, it was over $1 million we added onto our valuation just by implementing what I call the 5-for-1 principle. And you might go, well, how do I do that, Scott? And the answer first is what you don't do. You don't slow down growth. But what you do is you look at everything that you've got going on in the company and who here has a subscription that they bought that they're not using. And they go, oh, well, it's only $40 a month. I might use it someday. Well, that's $500 a year times 5 is $2.5 grand. Very simple decision. Who here doesn't shut off PPC campaigns that have too high of a cost in the morning, at night? I'll let it run a few more days. Every time you're doing that, you are bleeding money at 5 times the rate. And if you embed this in when you're growing your company, you will not only make you more profitable, but it'll also give you that discipline. And we go through what's called a 5-for-1 review, but you have to do it a year before you exit because you got to get the runway ramp of being more efficient and get that pop to your valuation.
And the easiest way to do this is just look at your bank statements and look at your credit card statements and see where the expenses are coming from. And then ask yourself, are you really using that? And if you're considering exiting, my wife and I are business partners. So we go out to dinner together, we go out to drinks together, we go on trips together, and we put it on the company card. Well, the year that you're going to exit, you might want to think twice about putting it on the company card after that, because it's going to be worth that multiple times that. So the lucky thing is we have 2 companies together, so we can just switch what company it goes on.
Yeah, and absolutely. And those are some of the strategies that we recommend. If you do any consulting or you do advising, have a separate LLC. Those business expenses shouldn't even make it to your P&L. Otherwise, you have to, argue for add backs and those types of things. But, everything times 5 gets to be a real number. And oftentimes, we'll find $50,000 to $100,000 relatively easy within a company. And that just added $250,000 to $500,000 onto a valuation price. And the disclaimer here is nobody can guarantee a multiple, but I can guarantee that the principle applies no matter what the multiple is. So then we take a look at it. We have a tool for this. Again, in the toolkit, you basically go down through your expenses, and COGS is usually a big part of it. Marketing is a big part of it, and operations. And you go down through and you create a fun way to look at what am I doing now? What's the status? And we implemented. I mean, when we were doing it in my first company, we got down to buying cheaper pens, cheaper notebooks. I mean, we took we got to a fervent level of it, and we made it fun because the management team was bought into it because they were bought in on the exit, and it became a fun thing rather than a annoyance thing because we all knew we were doing it for a purpose. And so now let's go to the step 3, which is you defined your strategy. What's my goal? How long do I want to run this? When do I want to exit? Then what you did is you said, okay, Scott's telling me on the revenue side, I got to plan my growth. I got to look at my bottlenecks. I got to build my forecast. Then I need to look at my expense side of the ledger, and I need to really, squeeze every dollar out of it to maximize it. And now all of a sudden it comes time that you say, hey, I'm ready to exit, and I want to think about, Scott, tell me, how do I optimize my valuation? And here's the process. Step 1 is like being a doctor, do no harm. You have to avoid the key mistakes, and you've got to mitigate the deal killers. And so once again, I'm not going to read through every one of these here, but you can see them. This is in all of the transactions we've done, hundreds of millions of dollars in transactions. These are the things that we see time and time again. Lack of forecast, running out of stock. Even if you run out of stock for 2 weeks the year before it, you probably cost yourself $100,000 or $150,000 on a sales price. You fix that by never being undercapitalized. Don't have any patent infringements. Make sure that you have good quality accounting, and make sure that your business is still growing. Then you go, okay, I got rid of the deal killers. Now I've got step 2. I got to build a compelling story. And Travis said it earlier, it bears repeating and repeating. Brand is significantly more important now because product and ranking on Amazon, playing the game of ranking, is now seen as unsustainable. You got to highlight your key accomplishments and where the company has been to draw this picture. And recognize that you also want to present the challenges that you haven't capitalized on yet. If you think about it, that's a key part for a buyer to understand for 2 reasons. One is it builds credibility, the second reason listed there, but it also gives them their path to an upside. We've got buyers that we work with that love companies that have 2 hero SKUs or 3 hero SKUs with no variations, because they go, I can insert colors, I can insert size. I've already got the supplier. I've already got the gas pedal down. I've got the PPC dialed in. I know the niche. That's beautiful. I'll pay a premium for that. So don't shy away from documenting internally and communicating to a buyer externally what you've got going on. And then discuss your vision for the brand and how it can get to the next level. Many people forget this step because they feel like it needs to be about the numbers, and they kind of close up in front of a buyer. We do a lot of buyer coaching where we actually coach you on how to have a buyer call. And the way I think about it is, you don't want to clamp up. You want to take up your full space, but not sound arrogant. But you want to have a compelling future for the brand of your company, because remember, a lot of times these buyers, they don't have a compelling understanding of your brand. They need you to draw that picture for them in a very clear way. And I do it using something I call the 3 questions test. The first one is, if a buyer can answer yes to these 3 questions, you probably have a deal. What are you asking me to believe? And for example, I'm asking you to believe I got a high growth company. How bad do I have to believe it? And if you're willing to take a significant amount of it on earnout or contingents, maybe they don't have to believe it too bad because you believe in it. And then third, what if I don't believe it? What is my return as a buyer if the wheels fall off or if things don't go well? And if it's just fine, even if the growth is slower than they expected, what happened is you've answered the most important question first. When you go out to a buyer, and whether you work with Northbound, you work with another advisor, if you decide to do it on your own, if you keep these questions in mind and recognize that your inclination is when they start questioning you about, well, what about this? What about that? Most people get excited and they keep saying, well, no, I'm not just high growth. I'm really high growth. I'm really, really high growth. And they get more on the excitement. What you need to do is build the foundation in rock, not in sand, and say, hey, most important thing I want to let you know about is we have so many new products in the pipeline that are coming out that unless you just screw up getting a boat from here to there, we're going to grow at 10 to 20%. And that's music to a buyer's ears. And oftentimes, if you're not skilled in negotiating, you won't have thought about that particular step.
And so this is just going back to slides, back to the story slide.
Yep.
This is exactly what we did with I Love. Is we weren't for sale when we actually sold, and we were getting presented with a lot of offers to buy us, which a lot of sellers, once you get into the multi-millions, you'll get offers just kind of presented to you all the time. And so we had this cookie cutter thing that we just sent back to all those people, and two people wanted to, explore it a little bit more, because it wasn't a low valuation. It was a pretty challenging offer to give us what we wanted, but we had that story in place. And that story was, this is where we are. This is how we built the business. Here's the opportunities of where to grow. And ultimately, who we decided to sell to, we sold to them because their model and how they built their business was all through wholesale. They go direct to doctor, and all of their products are built to their supplements. And so they're supplements that you consume, which take 3 to 6 months to fully feel relief on what you're trying to solve. Whereas in all of our products go after that same market, but we're at the front end. So we provide that instant relief, and it's all external. So it's stuff that you apply to the body. So the combination of their wholesale model with their product, which is a supplement, combined with our topical products that were the direct consumer brand, when we merge the two, they can now take our products to wholesale and all their doctors. We can now take their products direct to consumer. And that's why the merger happened. And that's why we ended up selling to them, because we could help them personally, like our brand could help them with them selling more, and then we could help them sell more with our agency. And so that's why it worked out so well, because we created this story for them. And that's why they paid a little bit more for than if we went to the market a typical way.
Yeah, and so this is critical, and here's the thought process about it. Once you had your story and your vision, it not only made it more compelling for the buyer, but it also helped you very easily sort what I call who should pay the most and who's the best partner. Because for you as the CEO, it became very clear that now that I laid my story down, if I don't lay that into somebody that shares the same story or can add to that story, it's highly unlikely that they're going to be the highest bidder for your particular business. So you may have done some things wrong. I would that you might be self-critical on, but you got this one right, and this one matters, arguably, more than all of the other ones. The other ones are, important to justify the story, but without that story, for people that get scared about building the story for the business, what I will point you to is your Amazon listing. Your Amazon listing doesn't think about what you want or what you think is the benefit in your product. You understood your customer and you built a listing, a headline, some proof points, a justification. You built a brand and packaging. You built a story about presenting a product, but more importantly, presenting a series of benefits and a solution. All your buyer is your ultimate customer. That's what I like to say. The ultimate customer, the ultimate buyer for your business is your ultimate customer, because they're the one that pays the most. And if you just think that you actually do have an ability to do this, what it requires is now knowing your buyer audience and understanding what it is. And by understanding what they're trying to accomplish in their world, you'll understand that side of it. And then what'll happen is you come to what I think is my mentor, Terry, who's done well, $20 billion in transactions, and that's with a B. He always said this to me when I started out: Scott, you have to, you got to forget, it's not what the seller is selling, it's what the buyer is buying. And your story, just like it needs to be in your Amazon listing, is the same for your buyer. It needs to be that. So once you've got your story, you go, okay, Scott, I've got my story. Travis, help me understand the importance of that. Then you go, how do I translate that story into negotiation? And I call it what I call eyes wide open exits. Defining your lanes, your levers, and your lifts. And if you said, hey, Scott, what's one reason that you've consistently been able to get premium valuations for people that you work with? I would point you right to this. And so I want to make sure that you understand it. You might not feel like you can do it right away, but if you watch this back over and you really think about it, it will make perfect sense. The first thing is called lanes, and that is the type of deal that you want to take. On one side, you have 100% up cash and you sold 100% of the equity. On the other hand, you just brought in debt to grow the company and you didn't sell any equity. And in the middle, there's what's called a preferred equity deal, a minority equity where I might sell 20% of it and take on an investor. I might sell 70 or 80% of it and have what's called rolled equity, or I might sell all of it on a cash plus earnout basis. Here's the important point is different growth and different trajectories on your business demand different lanes, and you can negotiate better if you have buyers in each one of these lanes, because if they're all in one lane, they all kind of know how much to pay. But if you have different lanes going on, you can start to understand the right way to balance certainty over here with upside over here. So the first thing is you have to get an understanding of lanes. But then you have to recognize that within each one of those lanes, there are different levers, and there's about 10 or 11 of them. And most people aren't aware of all of these, but there's cash up front. There's something called a holdback. There's guaranteed payments over time. There's earnouts and stabilization, which are basically contingent, but with different thresholds. There's an ability to roll equity in your business going forward, or maybe even to get equity in what's called the top co or the parent co. Then there's this getting paid for inventory, getting paid for net working capital, getting paid cash, but having to settle up your own debts out of your own company. And then there's my post-acquisition. If I'm going to work at this place for a year or two, am I going to get paid? So what we do when we think about negotiating all of that, I'll come to these levers, is the first thing that we then do is we go back to forecasting and we say, we need to know what's our lift. What is worst case, base case, and best case in terms of growth? And now hopefully you're starting to see the picture. If I've got the worst case, the base case, and the best, so I know what I am, now I can start to say, Scott, or yourself, if you're trying to do it yourself, we pull down on every one of these levers and we see what happens. And with some buyers, they don't like that when you pull down on that lever. With another buyer, they're like, yeah, we're willing to give you more money on an earnout. And then we do that across multiple lanes with multiple buyers in each lanes. And you might be getting overwhelmed and saying that's a lot of work. And I'd say, well, yeah, it is a lot of work, but it's a lot of work that pays you more than all the other work that you're doing. If you do it correctly, you then know which are the hot lanes that you should be in across each of your scenarios and how you can negotiate the optimized valuation for your company. If you're not doing this, you are leaving money on the table. You may decide, I just want to get out of this business and do 100% cash offer, at a 3 times multiple and go on to my next thing. So I'm not pejoratively saying that taking a less than premium offer is a bad thing, because in the right situation, there's exceptions to every rule. But if you came into this and said, Scott, tell me how you consistently negotiate premium valuations, it takes all 3 of these different variables, the X, the Y, and the Z axis, to zone in on who's the right buyer. And when you match that with the story that Travis mentioned, and then you have these capabilities, now we're starting to really, cook with gas and optimize a transaction.
And looking at those levers, that's something that, that's why it was so challenging for most people, that they kind of laughed at my offer that I'd send them back, that cookie cutter email I sent back, because it had 6 of these levers in it. And the people that finally said yes, they went with all 6 of them, because that's what we wanted. And we believed in our business and the potential of it moving forward. They believed in the business and the potential moving forward. We believed in their business and the potential moving forward. And so we were able to use a lot of those levers to show them that we believed, and we believed in them, we believed in ourselves, and we believed that with their help, we could skyrocket this business. And so that's why we had 6 of those levers. And, you might leave a lot on the table as a result of, it doesn't work out the way it's supposed to. But like you said, a seller or a buyer wants to be able to buy something that the seller is excited to sell, and then that they see the potential as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the way I think about it. If there's two ways to look at it. One is if I don't hit these, did I lose money? And the way I think about it is first, when you negotiate it, we want to figure out what the upfront cash value that buyers are generally willing to pay. What's the guaranteed amount? And basically that is the, that's the meat. Okay. Then this might be, the contingent stuff might be the cake. And then this might be the icing on the cake. Where people get into trouble is when they take a deal and they're planning on this having to happen, as opposed to the way that we do it is once we know what the maximum is, and I'm guaranteeing nobody's going to give you a guaranteed cash multiple of 8, 9, or 10x. It's just not going to happen. So once you know what the maximum is in each one of those tiers, and you know what your scenarios are, then you've got the ability to design a weighted average blend of that. And if I was to show an example of this in some of the tool set, you start to look at things like, okay, what's my multiple? How engaged are people? How much are they working on things? Then you go to, okay, in my worst case, my base case, and my best case, what's my valuation on my particular company? And as you can see here, my worst case scenario, I really don't do any better. I just wanted to set that. In my base case, I maybe double it. Maybe I go to, I use a dramatic example here to just illustrate the point, is that maybe you got some big new innovation coming out and you say, I want to get in on the equity of the seller, or excuse me, of the buyer. Until you do these things, you have no idea how to blend it. And so when you go through the exit process, you do this for one. Then what you do is you lay them side by side, all of these different offers and counter offers, and you separate it by what's guaranteed or non-contingent. So I love non-contingent money. I don't want anybody to put more risk out there than what they have to. It's about balancing reward and risk. And you do that across buyers. And then because you know your forecast, you now know how to counter. If I'm really concerned about my growth, it's not about maximizing my earnout because I might not hit that anyway. So you have to know all of those things. And when you do, it's just that I'll call it, it's almost a beautiful confidence because you know what the right deal is that you should be focusing in on, as opposed to a lot of people that might really feel like nervous or struggling. The next step is then you say, okay, that's just me, but there's actually 23 different synergies between me and a buyer on revenue and expenses that we've come up with. And you can get sub variations of these. So once I do that, and then I go, okay, where's my synergies like you did? You had them all over the place. You had, expansion to wholesale retail with buyer resources, which was their channels. You had a new market expansions, whatever it happens to be. You've got cash flow improvements you're looking to do. Then you have the ability to put together an offer that maximizes your deal, maximizes your risk versus return appetite. It gets you the upside. You have to evaluate the buyer capabilities, which means that you have to interview buyers while they're interviewing you. And it means that the last thing might be one of the most important is through this process, I'm no longer just banging on a negotiation. We've turned the corner and we're walking through the woods together and seeing whether or not we know, like, and trust each other, and how are we going to be able to work together as a team. And that doesn't mean you're going to stick with them for 5 years, but it means that unless you see that alignment, you will not have the confidence that you need in the business. The last step that I'll walk through is to show once I've got that here, then what I do, and again, this will be in the toolkit, too small to view now, but the simple thing is when you take your historical growth at an 8x multiple and you layer in growth and synergies, the higher your growth is, the lower the price gets for the buyer. This is the price curve. So they're buying it at 8x, but it's actually only 2x because it's going to grow, and the higher their yield gets. Now, don't look at the 8 and the 2 and say, oh, Scott knows how to get me an 8x multiple, although I've done that multiple times in a lifetime effective multiple. Look at it as when you know how to present this to a buyer, you understand the key curve that they're looking at in the Amazon listing language. You now know your audience and you know your buyer, which then allows you, to drive a valuation scenario guaranteed and contingent over time. When you have that picture, I'm now going to come to the end of the discussion here. You now have the blueprint of how to strategize, maximize, optimize, and realize. And when you put this power in your hands, the question that I would ask you is if you could take this blueprint and really execute on it, not over a week or even over a month or a quarter, but really strategically plan it. Do you see now, if nothing else, I want to open up your eyes that by doing this, your path to a premium exit looks a lot different? And I will tell you, it's the $1 million question, because it will add million or millions done right to your valuation. And it increases the likelihood that you get a deal. And as you can hear, I'm really passionate about this topic. I love spending time on it. And the reason I do is because I'll end with where I started. If we focus on doing this, you get the 50%, the other half of the equation that comes when you exit. And if you don't, you risk leaving hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars on the table that, again, in my passion center, you've just worked too hard in the business to not do the last step right. Or as I like to say, my final comment is, if you do 6 steps right in running a business and you don't do step 7 right in exiting it, you left more than half the money on the table that you worked to do the 6 steps. And with that, I'll just say thanks. And if you want to get a copy of any of the materials of the toolkit, or if you want to ask any questions, Scott at Northbound Group, we've got myself and a staff of people that are here to help you answer it. And I wish everybody success as you go forward down running and your exit path. And thanks a lot, Travis, for taking the time and caring enough about your audience to allow us to talk through this in quite a bit of detail.
Yeah, I appreciate this, Scott. And I did put your email down in the comments down below. So make sure you do send Scott an email and just put in exit toolkit in the subject line. He'll get you that toolkit. I know that I am going to start my business, my next business, with you. And so we're not just going to come to you when we're ready to exit. We're actually going to get started with you, so we know exactly how to run the business. And so when we go to that exit, it's already the flows, the forecasting, everything is already in place to make it easier for us to go to that exit. Plus, it's best practices, as I'm learning now in corporate America, that is the best practice, is that forecasting, that everything that we talked about in this whole episode.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, if there's folks out there that want to, talk about working with us, we don't lead with trying to sell people to come to Northbound. We lead with, how can we help work with you to drive your valuation? But we do have people that say, you know what, I want to get in right at the start, because building it right the first time is going to get me on the path that I need to. And so, this stuff it's so fascinating to me what a difference it can make. And that's why, that's what gets me excited. That's the straw that stirs my drink, I guess. So were there, I know we don't have a ton of time left, but were there any questions that came in or anything that you have? Otherwise, just happy to answer them, individually.
Nope, just some great comments. Brad says, this has been great. Thank you for your expertise. Athena says, Scott is the best there is, and 2 geniuses. So a lot of great comments, but no questions. I think he answered everything. So.
Okay, great. Well, if you got any individual ones, hit me up. Otherwise, thanks a lot. I really appreciate the time, Travis. And it's great talking with you. And frankly, it's fun talking about your exit, what went well, and then also always analyzing, every deal that we do a post-mortem on it. You find things you want to do better, but fun to always talk about the topic with somebody that's been there.
Yeah, and I appreciate you having you on.
All right, sounds good. Take care.
Amazon PPC may seem like a complex subject, but it doesn't have to be, and that is why we created this channel. On top of Amazon PPC, we're going to share different tactics and strategies that we've used to build a multi-million-dollar business, as well as the strategies that we're using to build a $100 million company, which is our goal. We don't know how we're going to get there yet, but that's our goal, and we want to take you along for the ride. So make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit the little bell to be notified whenever we come out with great business building and Amazon PPC strategies.